How fast can you realistically lose body fat if you go on a very strict diet? That's the question of the day. Hello, I'm Dr. Sam, this is Dr. Sam's Health, and today I would like to talk about one, in my opinion, very important question, which is how fast can you realistically expect to lose body fat when you go on a diet? Before I begin, I would like to make my regular disclaimers, which are mainly rotating around my professional credentials. I'm a medical doctor. I practice in Ontario, Canada, and I do not provide any kind of medical advice here on YouTube or over internet in general. I have published a book on weight loss, the rational diet. Check it out. I've got my website, drsamshealth.com. Check it out too. I've got some tools for you there, some blogs. And obviously, I have to say that everything I talk about here is provided purely for educational purposes. I do not necessarily represent my profession, psychiatry, medicine in general, and my opinions do not necessarily represent the opinions of my governing bodies, universities, colleges, and so on. Now we're done with the disclaimers, let's talk about the potential for weight loss. A lot of people are talking about how you can lose, 10 kilos in 10 days, which is a very unrealistic goal. I spoke about it in the past. Some people are claiming that you can lose a pound of body fat per day, which is also a very ambitious goal to say the least. And also I spoke about a couple of experiments and a couple of articles in my previous video about one specific concept, purely academic, that is based on the Minnesota Starvation study data when they have calculated the fat loss limit. Essentially, the whole point of that article was that the amount of body fat that you can lose per day or per week or per month is heavily dependent on the amount of body fat that you have. And they came up with a certain number, which we can use to calculate certain limits. I personally believe that there is another limit, which is way more important. And this limit is based on the idea that in order to lose weight and body fat, you have to be in a caloric deficit. And the amount of caloric deficit pretty much determines the amount of body weight and body fat that you can lose. That idea, that concept, pretty much implies that if you really want to lose body fat fast, you can create some sort of an enormous caloric deficit and lose body fat much faster than majority of people do. And I believe that this idea is a little bit misleading and creates some sort of ambitious expectations that are actually very difficult to fulfill. And at a certain point, I think that a lot of people are encouraged to create a huge caloric deficit and try to lose fast, because we all want to lose it really fast, right? But also, I think it's not very practical. And in the end of the day, a lot of people are actually losing their motivation to lose body fat because they are having high expectations and the reality doesn't meet them. So what I would like to do today is I would like to run a couple of scenarios and to see how much body fat can people lose while taking into consideration the caloric deficit limit and the body fat mobilization limit that I spoke about in my previous video. Let's start with the following example. Say we have a person who weighs 100 kilos and has 30% body fat, which essentially places this person into the category of overweight. And this person wants to lose body fat as fast as they can. So we can calculate their total daily energy expenditure, which really depends on their physical activity level. So say we have this person who has 30 kilograms of body fat and 70 kilograms of lean body mass, and accordingly their resting metabolic rate will be around 2000 kilocalories. And let's say they are sitting in a chair most of the day, they have some desk job, they do not engage in much physical activity, and the PAL coefficient will be 1.2. So their total daily energy expenditure will be approximately 2500 kilocalories. And this person decides to go on a very strict diet. They create a nutritional plan that involves consuming, say, 1000 calories a day, which is a relatively low amount. It's actually much lower than in the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. And this person accordingly will have a theoretical caloric deficit of approximately 1500 kilocalories per day, which is huge. And in this kind of scenario, if we translate this amount of caloric deficit into body fat that needs to be burned in order to meet the energy requirements of this person's body, and assuming that it's pure body fat that has been used for energy in this kind of scenario, this person will be able to lose approximately 188 grams of body fat per day, which is already a remarkable result, but it's, as you can see, even just based on these calculations, it doesn't meet this expectation of losing like a pound of body fat per day. It's much, much lower. Let's try to apply the fat mobilization limit to this kind of scenario. Relatively overweight person, heavy person. According to the article that I was talking about in my previous video, this person will have a limit of approximately 270 grams of body fat per day. So this person will be able to mobilize theoretically much more body fat that they can even theoretically burn per day in this kind of scenario. My point is that even if you create a huge caloric deficit, this fat mobilization limit will likely not apply to this situation at all. Let's talk about a different scenario. Let's say this person went a very strict diet over the course of 2, 3, 4 months. This person has lost 20 kilograms of body fat, remained at the same level of lean body mass, and say they increase their physical activity level to like moderate physical activity level, and accordingly their total daily energy expenditure has increased. And let's say at this point they weigh 80 kilos, 10 kilos of that are body fat, and 70 kilos are still lean body mass. This person is already at 12.5% body fat, which is quite lean by all standards, definitely both for males and definitely for females. And this person's total daily energy expenditure is around 3,200 kilocalories per day, and at the same time their fat mobilization limit is now much lower because they have way less body fat left. So according to this hypothesis that you can only mobilize certain amount of body fat, they can only mobilize 90 grams of body fat per day. Whereas if they keep being on this diet of 1,000 calories a day, their caloric deficit will be over 2,000 kilocalories per day, which is even bigger than when we started our exercise. And accordingly, this person theoretically would be able to burn approximately 280 grams of body fat per day. Obviously, in this kind of scenario, we can see a clear discrepancy between the amount of body fat that should be burned in order to compensate for caloric deficit and the amount of body fat that we can mobilize based on our theoretical calculations. This is obviously a very interesting scenario, but the devil is in details, always. And here I would like to draw your attention to a couple of important caveats. First of all, the person is quite lean, and I would say that the situation when we run into this problem with theoretical fat mobilization limit only applies to people who are in a huge caloric deficit and they are already quite lean. So for this kind of people, usually it's not even that important to burn as much fat as they can, unless they are maybe competitive bodybuilders or something like that. Second thing is that the amount of caloric deficit that is created, again, it's huge, and it's unrealistic to expect that this caloric deficit will be compensated for by burning fat only. And actually, in real life scenarios, I can safely assume that we never burn 100% body fat. We do burn some carbs, some glucose. We definitely burn some protein. We convert protein into ketones or into glucose and burn them there. So in the majority of cases, only maybe like 60-70% of body fat has been used for compensation of caloric deficit. And the last point I would like to make, or I would rather say re-emphasize, is that there is a certain reasonable process of weight loss, reasonable way of setting up your weight loss goals, mapping out your weight loss journey. I actually talk about it in my book in great detail. Actually, half of the book likely dedicated to that. And I want everybody to keep in mind that there are certain limits in terms of how much body fat you can lose per day, per week, per month, how fast you can lose body fat. And if you exceed certain speed of fat loss, uh, usually it is very taxing. And I don't want anybody to set up any kind of unrealistic goals and feel discouraged to continue just because it's too hard. Having said that, I think I made my main point, and I will definitely keep working on the same idea in terms of giving you some tips in terms of how to make the process of weight loss most efficient and least problematic, least taxing. And that would be it for today. Thank you for watching. Leave comments, ask questions. Stay tuned, subscribe, check out my website, drsamshealth.com, get a book. Let me know what you think about that. And that will be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. All the very best.